All right, folks, good morning. Welcome to our training on the exclusive buyer broker agreement and the new upcoming forms that are going to be in use later on this summer. As of August 17th, you guys may already know there are new regulations that are going to take place when we work with our buyers. So we hope to clear up some confusion here. It's still ongoing. It's still NER and the Florida Association of Realtors are still making some changes and some updates, but we hope to clear up at least some doubt during this training. Guys, we are recording our session. If you have any questions, please feel free and unmute yourselves. This is an important class. Of course, it's interactive, so we hope that you can ask questions if you need to. All right, guys. So I am inside of Form Simplicity. And inside of Form Simplicity, of course, is where you're going to find all of our forms. You have the buyer broker agreement. And if you have logged into Form Simplicity today, you'll notice that there was a new notification that was posted where 2 new forms just became active overnight. We have 2 compensation agreement forms that became active overnight that we are going to be using. All right, so the exclusive buyer broker agreement, of course, is a contract or an agreement between us, the buyer agent, and our buyers. As of August 17th, we will be required to use the exclusive buyer broker agreement with every buyer to even show one property. All right, so we must practice how to fill this out, and we must practice how to present this to our buyers and present our value proposition, right? What is a value proposition? Of course, it's a presentation of our value as a buyer agent, okay? There's a lot that goes into our work as a buyer agent, and we need to learn how to present that to our buyers. Buyers aren't used to paying commissions, okay? And, I guess I'm going to start with the word commission. We should not use commissions anymore, especially when we're discussing percentages on the MLS and with other agents. You know, uh, with your client, yes, you can use the word commission, but with other agents and especially on the MLS, you should not use the word commissions. It could be a concession, a contribution, but definitely not the word commissions. Okay. Now, we are inside of Form Simplicity, and I'm going to go ahead and show you how to find the exclusive buyer broker agreement first. And then we are also going to cover the 2 new forms that were just added into Form Simplicity. All right, so here we are in blank forms. I'm going to go ahead and click on blank forms inside of Form Simplicity. And all you need to do is go to that search bar that you see on the upper right and just type in the word buyer. Type in the word buyer. You're going to see all the forms that contain the word buyer in it. Here are the 2 new forms that were just added yesterday. Compensation agreement, seller to buyer's broker. And then you have compensation agreement, seller's broker to buyer broker. We will discuss both of these, okay? These are listing agreements and commission forms. They're part of that category. We will discuss how to use both of those. And today, we are also going to discuss, of course, the exclusive buyer broker agreement transaction broker. Remember, in Florida, we are all transaction brokers, so you should only use this one here. There is the exclusive buyer broker agreement single agent. There's also the one for no relationship, no broker relationship, and there's one that is meant to transition you into a transaction broker in the event that you signed up your buyer as a single agent. All right. So we're going to go right here. We're going to click on the exclusive buyer broker agreement, and this is how you open the form. And of course, we are going to discuss how to fill up this form. All right. So Just like when you represent a seller and you need a listing agreement, right? The exclusive right to sell listing agreement, transaction broker. Now, when we work with buyers, we should also get the exclusive buyer broker agreement. The first line, you're going to write the buyer's names, right? The second line here, you're going to write your name right here, and then you're going to write the office that you work with. So once again, here you're going to write your name, and then right here you're going to write Elite Ocean View Realty. Number 2 talks about the terms. Here you're going to write the date that this agreement will begin, and here you're going to write the day that this agreement will expire. Now think about how long it takes you to find your buyer the property and them placing an offer on the property and actually closing on this property. So give yourself some time. If it's going to be 90 days, then put in here a 90-day expiration. Or if you think that you're going to take more than 90 days, perhaps 4 months, 5 months, or 6 months, then you're going to place the expiration date of that buyer broker agreement here. Okay. Number 3 talks about the interest of the buyer. So type of property. I recommend, guys, that we write the word residential if they are looking for a single family home, condo, townhome, villa, any property that's considered residential. Do not just write single family home, because what if they change their mind and they look at a townhouse, right? So cover yourself and just go ahead and write under type of property, residential property. If they are looking for a commercial property, then you're going to write commercial property. When it comes to location, all right, we're going to go ahead and write Miami-Dade County and Broward County. You want to write Palm Beach County as well, you can. You want to make sure that you cover yourself in all areas. You may be looking at properties in Miami-Dade and Broward County. So you want to make sure that you write the counties under location. Definitely try not to just write a city like Miami Beach, because then this agreement is no good if the buyer ends up looking at properties in Aventura. All right, so just write the counties. As far as price range, you're going to go ahead and write a minimum and a max price range. Okay, then you have over here, buyer has been pre-approved or pre-qualified. So you're going to ask your buyer, hey, have you been pre-approved? If so, by who? So you're going to put in here the lender, all right, ABC lender. And then underneath, if there are any terms on this approval. So for example, the amount, so you're going to say they've been approved for $700,000. And then you're going to write any conditions. What are the conditions of this approval? Well, wait, right next to the price, you're gonna write whether it's conventional approval or FHA approval. We're just gonna go ahead and put in here conventional. So a conventional approval, and underneath that, where it says preferred terms and conditions, that's where you're gonna write the conditions to this approval. So far, so good, everybody. You guys have any questions on what we're going over here?
Hey, Robert,
A
sorry to
question.
interrupt, but
Oh,
Yes.
okay, I'll go first. Thank you. So regarding the terms and conditions, can you give like an example of, let's say it's the 700,000 conventional and, examples of what to write there.
All right, so when a pre-approval is given, right, the lending institution is going to do a financial study on the buyer. They're going to check their credit, they're going to check their income, they're going to check their debt. And let's say one of the approvals or one of the conditions to this approval is that they pay off a $2,000 debt they have. So that's a one of the terms. Maybe they're approved upon the sale of their home. So they're trying to buy a home, right? They're trying to get approved for 700 grand. They will be approved upon the sale of their current home. So that would be another condition that you would write. So lenders, when they do a pre-approval, they'll tell you, hey, you've been pre-approved, no conditions. So no conditions means everything checks out and you have the green light to go ahead and purchase a home up to $700,000.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
My question was, what about if they're a cash buyer?
So if there's a cash buyer, then right here, you're not going to check here. So buyer has been pre-qualified, pre-approved. So this is just really for, for people who are going to be using a lender.
Okay, so would I write that in the terms and conditions? Just put cash buyer?
Yeah, if you want to protect yourself, go ahead and just put here cash buyer. Either way, I mean, your compensation is down here. Like what we're going to get compensated is down here. So right now we're just
Okay.
talking about the buyer's, the buyer's approval status and what price range they're looking at, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, guys, the Realtor Association of Miami is having multiple classes in person and on Zoom. These classes, I mean, I took two of them already, and they're good for 3 credit hours. And it goes over the exclusive buyer broker agreement, guys. So look for signing up for one and taking one of these because it's important, of course, right? So number 4 is the broker's obligation. So that would be our obligation, our promise to our buyer. All right. So use the broker's professional knowledge and skills. Assist buyers in determining the buyer's financial capability and financing options. Right. Everything that we always do with our buyers. We discuss property requirements and assist buyers in locating and viewing suitable properties. All right. We assist buyers to contract the property. So we assist buyers in writing up the contract, monitor deadlines, and close any resulting transaction. Okay. We're going to cooperate with real estate licensees working with the seller, if any, to affect a transaction. Buyer understands that even if broker is compensated by a seller or a real estate licensee who is working with a seller, such compensation does not compromise broker's duty to buyer. Guys, this form has not been updated yet. I want you guys to take a look at the revision. The last revised form of the exclusive buyer broker agreement goes back to 2016. So you understand that this is not a new form. This is just a form that we are going to start using from now on. And we were pretty much never using it. Why? Because it was somewhat of an industry standard that the listing office or the selling agent would compensate the buyer agent half of their commission or whatever percentage they were giving. So now, since we will not see on the MLS, let me take a quick look here. We will not see on the MLS a compensation field as of August 17th. We will not see this field. 2%, 2%. We will not see this field. So we need to secure compensation from our buyer. All right. So in essence, our buyer is going to hire us to represent them and they're going to pay us. I know that this is a tricky, situation. Our buyers aren't used to paying commission, but there's going to be ways around it. All right. Trust me, there's going to be ways around it. Question on the chat, does this pertain to rentals too? Yes, this is also going to pertain to rentals. This buyer broker agreement is also good when you're working with renters. All right. All right, so there's other responsibilities that the buyer broker will take into account, and here's the explanation. Guys, please learn each of these. Make sure you know how to explain to your buyer your value, your worth. You know, if you've ever closed a deal as a buyer agent, you know how much work it requires, right? It does require quite a bit of work, quite a bit of negotiations of pricing, and also following deadlines. So we need to get paid, right? So make sure that you know the broker's obligations. Then here, the buyer is going to agree on cooperating with you, right? Buyer's obligations. The buyer agrees to cooperate with the broker in accomplishing the objectives of this agreement. A, conducting all negotiations and efforts to locate suitable property only through the broker and referring to broker on all inquiries. Basically, they are now your exclusive buyer and you are their exclusive agent. If buyer contacts or is contacted by a seller or a real estate licensee who is working with the seller or views a property unaccompanied by the buyer broker, at first opportunity, advise the seller or real estate licensee that the buyer is working with a representative. All right, so let's say your buyer goes out on the weekend and visits an open house without you, right? And of course, there is a listing agent at the open house, and they are going to ask the buyer, hey, do you have an agent? Under this agreement, your buyer must disclose that they have an agent. They're using the services of the agent they have this agreement with. Okay? Without this form today, if your buyer goes and visits an open house and your buyer does not have a good relationship with you, and they visit an open house without you, and they work with the agent that has that open house to purchase that property, you are completely out of luck. Without this agreement, all right, legally, the buyer can proceed with the purchase of that property without you. All right, this is the importance of having this agreement, okay? Now, of course, most buyers, we hope that are loyal to us right now. You've built rapport with the buyer, and even if they visit an open house, they're gonna say, yes, I do have an agent, and my agent is going to contact you as soon as possible to draw up an offer. Okay. Listing agents who host open houses usually will say, all right, do you have an agent? Yes or no. If they do, they're going to ask for your agent's information or for their agent's information. If they don't, then of course, they're going to ask the buyer for their information so they can start working that buyer. All right. So right here, providing broker with accurate personal and financial information requested by the broker. Once again, as an agent, I'm going to want to know if this buyer is pre-approved. All right. Does this buyer have a pre-approval? I'm going to want to know that. C, being available to meet with broker at reasonable times for consultations and to view properties. Once again, the buyer must cooperate with you as the agent on the times that you're going to view property. If it's unreasonable, if it's 8 o'clock in the evening, and that's the only time they can view properties, that's going to be a problem. Okay, that's going to be a problem. They must make some time, either in the weekend or early morning hours during the week, some time to view properties. All right, and then we have here, I indemnify and holding broker harmless from and against all losses, damages, costs, and expenses of any kind. So once again, they're going to be responsible for any fees that we place down here if they violate this agreement. All right, so let's move on to number 6, retainer. This is something that is rarely used. However, you may want to consider this option. All right, so sort of like to say, hey, look, we're serious about this. we're going to collect upfront a $1,000 retainer. Everyone here knows what a retainer is. When you retain the services of an attorney, for example, you got to pay them upfront, a sort of like a deposit. All right. I don't think we're going to be using this, but of course, this is your option if you think that you should use a retainer. And if you do use a retainer like $1,000, over here on the right, it says this fee is not refundable and will or will not be credited to the buyer's compensation. Remember, we are going to ask them for a compensation down here. So this $1,000 is not refundable, and you should write and will be credited to the buyer's compensation, all right, in this agreement. I don't see why we should write will not be credited to the buyer's compensation. No, let's use that $1,000 as part of the credit towards our compensation. All right, so number 7, once again, this is a slippery slope here, asking for an upfront money to represent a buyer. Maybe you want to just leave that at 0 and not really use number 6. But if you are going to use a retainer, this is how you would do it. All right, so number 7, compensation. Broker's compensation is earned when, during the term of this agreement or any renewal or extension, buyer or any person acting on or behalf of buyer contracts to acquire real property as specified in this agreement. Buyer will be responsible for paying broker the amount specified below, plus any applicable taxes, but will be credited with any amount which broker receives from a seller or a real estate licensee who's working with the seller. So let's discuss this. A, all right, is it going to be a flat fee or is it going to be a percentage? You know, we work percentages, so we're going to go ahead and put in 3%. We want the buyer to compensate us 3% commission or compensation, right, of the purchase price. Now, let's say the seller is offering 2% concessions, right? You're looking at a listing, pretend that this field down here, the buyer agent compensation and the transaction broker compensation, pretend that this field now no longer exists, right? As of August 17th. But we call the listing broker, and the listing broker tells us, Robert, my seller's offering 2% concession to the buyer closing costs. So if the seller's offering 2% and we sign this agreement for 3%, right? We sign this agreement for 3%, then that means that at closing, the buyer only needs to compensate us 1 percentage point. Okay? Now, if the concession that is offered by the seller equals the amount that you put on your agreement, then the buyer does not have to compensate you for your services. That's pretty much coming from the seller. Okay? Now, if your buyer compensates you 3% here, or maybe you write, for example, 2.5%. Maybe you write 2.5%, and that's what you agree with your buyer. And the concession from the seller is 3%, okay? You're not going to keep the extra half. All right, that extra half should go towards the buyer's closing costs. Let's help your buyer here get a little credit towards their closing costs. You agreed to get paid 2.5%. So this is why you should put here 3%. All right, protect yourself and go always for 3%. Notice line B is also for leasing. So once again, this agreement is good when you lease. So what do we make in leases? 50%. 50% or half or 5% of the yearly rent. All right. So This is good also for leases. And then you have here option broker, C, and then you have other broker compensated, and then you have E, buyer default. So basically, we're using purchase or exchange of monies for a purchase or a lease. Normally, we don't really do option brokers or the others that you see here. Protection period, number 8, it is 180 days, guys. Let's read this. Buyer will pay broker's commission if within 180 days after termination date, buyer contracts to acquire any property which was called to by buyer's attention by the broker. So basically, any property that I showed my buyer, whether it's through the MLS or by viewing the property personally, okay, or any other person or found by buyer during the term of this agreement, buyer's obligation is to pay the broker's fee ceases upon buyer entering into a good faith estimate, or not good faith estimate, good faith exclusive buyer broker agreement with another broker after the termination date. So let's stop right there. So if this buyer, okay, goes and purchase a property that we showed them either through the MLS or in person, that we actually visited the property, after this agreement is completed, after this agreement has expired, within 180-day period, you will get compensated the 3% that you are owed. Unless, so here it says here, all right, broker's fee ceases upon buyer entering into another buyer broker agreement with another broker after the termination date. So now this buyer, all right, enters into another BBA, buyer broker agreement with another agent after this agreement has expired. Now you are completely out of luck. All right, you will not get compensated. So let's say you work with your buyer for 180 days, right? Or whatever you put up here. You work with your buyer for 180 days. After this agreement has expired, your buyer now goes and uses another realtor to purchase a home you showed them. But they do not sign a buyer broker agreement, you will get compensated. But you know what, guys? Starting August 17th, every agent is going to have a buyer sign this. So this protection period was good while it lasted. I don't see how this protection period is going to be any good, because the moment a buyer wants to work with an agent, they're going to have to sign this. So there's no more protection period. Once they sign a buyer broker agreement with a new agent, you're not going to get compensated. So really, this agreement is just to make sure that you are compensated from your buyer what you're asking, the services that you're asking up here. Okay. So I do see number 8 kind of being washed aside. Early termination. All right. So if there's an early termination, says here, buyer may terminate this agreement at any time by written notice to broker, but will remain responsible for paying buyer's broker compensation if from an early termination date to termination date plus protection, buyers called to attention by another agent to purchase a property. So basically, we signed this agreement for 6 months. 1 month into it, they decide they want to terminate. Yes, they have every right to terminate, but within the next 5 months of when this agreement should have been active still, they purchase another property, you will get compensated if they do not sign a buyer broker agreement. It's kind of confusing. Because from what I understand, every buyer will have to sign a buyer broker agreement starting August 17th. So number 8 and number 9 is like, it's not gonna, it needs to be reworked, or it's not really going to really matter. All right, guys, special clauses. Remember that in part of our contract, we are going to ask the buyer to pay $495 broker transaction fee at closing. So you want to make sure that you write that. And then, of course, down here, your buyer's signatures, your signature, and our broker's signature. So your signature under real estate associate, and then we have Teo's signature under real estate broker. This is the buyer broker agreement, guys. It's only 3 pages. Read every single part of this agreement, learn it. It's not hard to read. It really isn't hard either to explain, but what we must do is that we must practice on how to show our buyers our value, the value. So build yourself a nice presentation on your value and your worth as a buyer agent. Okay. Any questions on this agreement before we move on to 2 new agreements that were added to Form Simplicity overnight, last night? Negative, we're good. All right. So we're going to go ahead and close out the buyer broker agreement, guys. Again, I want to stress that it is very important for us to get this signed by our buyer beginning August 17th. It will be required. It will be required. You're going to be required to have this when you work with buyers. Okay. Now, what we don't know yet is how the listing agent will tell us what form of compensation or concession is being offered by the seller. Since this field is going to be removed, all right, we don't know this yet. This is ongoing and we just have to adjust to the changes. Since this field here is going to be removed from the MLS, we really don't know how the listing agent is going to let us buyer agents know that concessions are being offered. I have to imagine it's going to be part of the broker's remarks. I don't think the MLS is going to add a field called concessions. I mean, this is why we're in this lawsuit in the first place, right? Buyer agent commission, this is or compensation that's going to be vanished, right? We cannot talk about commissions or even compensations on the MLS anymore. So somehow, some way in the remarks, broker remarks, not the remarks, but the broker remarks, perhaps the listing agent is going to write what type of concessions are being offered, if any. The other way is going to be a little longer, but we're going to have to call the listing agent directly and say, hey, I have a buyer interested in making an offer on your property or showing your property. And I just want to know, is the seller offering any concessions? So yes, it's going to take us an extra step. We're going to have to contact the listing agent and we're going to have to get information from this listing agent in order to proceed. Guys, of course, we want to save our buyers money. And if we can find a property that offers concessions, then your buyer is going to save money at closing. Because if the seller's offering 3% concession and you sign the buyer broker agreement for 3%, then at closing, pretty much those monies wash out, they balance out. But if your buyer does fall in love with a property where the seller does not offer a concession, then we are looking at the buyer having to pay an additional 3% on top of their down payment and closing costs at closing. So it will become more expensive for your buyer to purchase that property. Good news is that I see about 91% of sellers are going to continue to offer some type of concession. Think about how many properties will probably remain on the market if no concessions are offered, right? The MLS is a shared database, and here we are representing buyers looking for properties, and they're not offering concessions. And then my buyer's going to say, well, you know, to purchase this property is going to cost me 3% more. I'd rather look at other properties that do offer concessions. So I think sellers will get a grip on that and understand that if we just continue to work as we've been working, everything is going to be fine. There will be sellers that will take advantage and offer a lot less, maybe 1% concession or maybe 1.5%. And then that means that we have to get the other, the remaining balance of the concessions from our buyer. All right, guys. So if you guys opened up Form Simplicity this morning, you would have seen a notification of 2 new agreements that were added to the forms library. I'm going to go ahead and type here again, buyer. We're going to search. Here are the 2 new forms that were just added. Compensation agreement, seller to buyer's broker, and compensation agreement, seller's broker to buyer's broker. In the title of each form, it tells you what they're going to be used for. So if the seller is going to compensate the buyer's broker, then you're going to want to have this signed. If the seller's broker, right? So the listing agent and their representation is going to compensate the buyer's broker, pretty much how it's been for the last, 20 plus years, which is that the seller's broker will share their commission with the buyer's broker, then you're gonna have to get this signed. So let's take a look at the first one. Seller to buyer's broker. Compensation agreement, seller to buyer's broker. All right, parties. This seller to buyer's broker compensation agreement is between the buyer's broker, who's that? Elite Ocean View Realty, right? And seller. Seller would be the owner of the property who's selling the property. They agree to compensate Elite Ocean View Realty for the property. The term, all right, this compensation agreement takes effect when a fully executed copy of this contract is delivered to all parties and will remain in effect for a certain amount of days, if left blank, 30 days. Buyer's broker compensation. If buyer's broker is the procuring cost of the sale, so if the buyer's broker brings a buyer of this property during this term, seller will compensate buyer's broker as stated below at closing of the property. So you're going to put here 3%, right? 3% of the gross purchase price of the property plus any other fees. What other fees? I don't know. You're not really going to charge them the transaction fee. So in reality, plus no other fees. Okay. So just of the gross purchase price, 3% of the gross purchase price. And then it has here some information on dispute resolution. And then here are arbitration, miscellaneous clauses, and then broker's commission are not set by law and are fully negotiable. All right. In no event will buyer's broker compensation exceed the amount of compensation in the written agreement with the buyer. You see that right there? So if you get an exclusive buyer broker agreement signed for 2.5%, and the seller will offer 3% concession, that extra half percentage point you don't get. It goes towards the buyer's closing costs, right? Because in no event will buyer's broker compensation exceed the amount of compensation in the written agreement with the buyer. All right, you're going to get this signed by the seller. And then you're going to get this signed by the broker of our office. Broker or authorized associate, you can sign it, right, as the representative of this transaction. That is form number 1, guys. That's the compensation. All right, let's go back over here. Let's type here. What I recommend is that you download yourself a copy of all 3 of those forms and learn them. And that was the compensation agreement, seller to buyer's broker. Then there's this one here, compensation agreement, seller's broker to buyer's broker. That pretty much is how we've been working for the longest time, right? The seller's broker shares their commission with the buyer's broker. So here again is another new agreement between the seller's broker and the buyer's broker. So ABC Realty with Elite Ocean View Realty. Property in question, all right, buyer's name optional. All right, you don't have to put in here the buyer's name. And then the term, all right, 30 days if you leave it in blank. And then buyer's broker compensation. Seller's broker will compensate buyer's broker as stated below at closing. And once again, go ahead and ask for 3%, 2.5%, whatever percentage you deem fair for this transaction. Okay. When are you going to get this filled out? You're going to get this filled out when you are presenting an offer. When you are presenting an offer and you've confirmed, right? You've confirmed with the listing agent that indeed the seller is offering 3% concession. Then you're going to also want this filled out because this is going to protect your compensation. All right. So this is going to protect your compensation that you get at closing from the seller. Otherwise, your compensation needs to come from the buyer through the exclusive buyer broker agreement. So very important, if you confirmed that the seller indeed is offering a concession, which equals to the amount that you are charging, then you want to go ahead and get this signed. So you are now, your compensation is secured. Guys, these are
I have a question.
Yes.
Oh, so if the seller is not offering concession, then this form would not take place, correct? You would not use this form for the seller
Correct.
broker.
Correct.
Okay.
If for some reason our buyer falls in love with a property that they are not offering concessions, then there's no need for these forms. The buyer has already agreed to pay us a a compensation on the BBA.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So, as you guys can see, it's going to make our jobs just a little bit more difficult, as in explaining these new changes to our buyers. And then, of course, doing a little bit more research when we're searching for properties on the MLS. And our buyer says, hey, Robert, I want to see that house in Color Bay. It's just really one extra step, guys. You guys normally call the listing agent anyways to schedule to see the property, unless they have it on super lockbox and no appointment required. But if it says appointment only, call listing agent, we're still going to call the listing agent and we're going to ask the listing agent, hey, lady, is the seller offering a concession? And if the listing agent says yes, they're offering a 3% concession, then when we show the property and we agree to place an offer, we're going to then submit the compensation form that we just showed you. Okay. Guys, if you have any questions in regards to this, please contact myself or you can contact Teo. We'd be more than happy to go over this, but also don't forget, there are classes available, many classes through the association that explain everything antitrust. This whole thing is called the antitrust lawsuit or whatnot. So there are many classes you can take and you can take advantage. They're giving you 3 credit hours towards your continuing education. All right, so definitely something that that you guys need to prepare for. All right, so I'm going to read here a question that was sent to me directly through the chat. I have a question. I have a buyer coming in, and he is coming in this week. However, he might close after the 17th. Do I still have to fill this out? So the answer is no. You don't have to fill this out yet. We do not have to get the buyer broker agreement signed until August 17th. Any transaction that occurs prior, or any offer that is agreed prior to August 17th, will be, I guess, grandfathered in, and you do not need this, this form or this way of working. All right. You're going to see the compensation on the MLS all the way up until August 17th, I would imagine so. All right. All right, folks, we did record our training, and I just placed a link to our YouTube channel. All right, you're going to see my picture on this YouTube channel because these are my videos, and I have recordings of pretty much every class that I do on Tuesdays and Thursdays in here. If you guys have not visited this YouTube channel, it is a world of resources here, guys. So please visit the YouTube channel. I am going to post today's video on this channel so you guys can rewatch it later on. And of course, if you have any questions, you guys all know how to contact me. And please contact Tail as well for any questions. We're here for you guys. All right. So does anyone have any questions now before we end our training?
Negative, Rob.
All right, perfect. So I'm getting a few thank yous through the chat and in person. So thank you so much for joining today's class. We hope that you find it useful, that you're not afraid anymore to use the buyer broker agreement. It's just going to become standard. Guess what? If your buyer refuses to sign this agreement, they're going to have to sign it with the next agent they work with. So let's learn how to explain to our buyer our value, and let them know that we're going to do everything possible to find them a property that they like, and that perhaps the seller offers a concession so they don't have to pay too much at closing. All right, guys. So thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Robert,
Yes.
real quick, next Thursday, there's no meeting, right?
There's no meeting this Thursday. No.
Okay.
Have a great 4th of July weekend, everyone. Long weekend, if that's possible as realtors.
Have a good 4th, Rob. Have a
Yeah.
good week, guys.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.